2 Timothy, the 4th chapter, verse 7. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Bob, our friend, you certainly did.
Thank you, Chip. And Roy Schroeder, Jr., who I believe is going to speak for junior and senior. We'll see. We're doing this because Bob, before he died, said, "Do not let Roy Sr. speak at my funeral." You know I'm kidding, Roy.
I don't think you were. So good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Roy Schroeder, Jr., as I was introduced. My father is certainly right back there, long time friend of Bob Haley. And so I'm going to read a little letter, or a little note that my father wrote when he was asked to speak. So this is from Roy Sr. We first met the Haleys in 1967 when we moved to Elmhurst and joined Epiphany. The Haley family were already well established and well known in our church. Bob and also Bill Kallstrom were the first men that reached out on an individual basis, helping me to feel welcome at a church. It was very much appreciated. At first, we were just church friends, nods and smiles, chit-chat. We became very close friends after I retired and began playing golf with the Epiphany guys on Tuesday. But before that, my son Roy and I played with Bob and Martha quite by accident one time. We were at White Pines and got paired up with them. It was then I learned why Martha had the nickname Nice Shot Martha. Shot after shot down the middle of the fairway. Bob, on the other hand, was a little more erratic, like most of us. We reached the tee box. It was a late afternoon. The sun was shining down right in our eyes, right in the center of the fairway. And Bob was quite concerned about seeing the ball after he hit the shot. So he made a real effort to line us up all perfectly so that, the shadows would get in our way and we'd be able to see the sun, very precise the way Bob always did it. So we're all up, lined perfectly right behind him. Then he turns around and alerts us to watch the ball he's going to hit. And he hits his tee shot. Unfortunately, he tops it. The ball rolls like a mouse and dies about 15 yards in front of us. Well, following proper golf etiquette, no one says a word. Then, all of a sudden, Martha says, "I see it, Bob." Naturally, that broke the tension. Our long-time relationship got off to kind of a rocky start. As most of you know, Bob likes to tease and needle people, as do I. It soon turned into a contest, not allowing the other guy to one-up each other. More than once, we ended the day convinced that the other was a real jerk. We finally grew to appreciate each other's humor and occasionally fed each other some straight lines. Our trips to Myrtle Beach were great, with many memorable times. 8 days with 19 of your best friends are bound to produce a lot of humorous events. Recently, either Bob and I could start a story about Myrtle Beach and halfway through just start laughing. It was the connection we had. It was the way we enjoyed the stories. As with most stories like this, you probably had to be there to really get it. One last anecdote, which capitalized our friendship. We were playing the Dunes Golf Course, which has very fast, undulating greens. Bob had missed his first 2 putts and asked, "Is this good?" I responded, "If you have to ask, it's not." So that really frustrated him, and he missed the putt and stormed off the green. 4 putts is bad enough, but when it made matters worse was that his friend wouldn't even concede the putt. As we were walking off the green, I sneezed, and the other 2 said, "God bless you." Bob was still steaming and remained quiet. On the next tee, I was in the middle of my backswing, and Bob said in a harsh, unfriendly, loud voice, "God bless you." So I stopped, turned around, and said, "What was that?" He responded, "Well, you sneezed." "But that was like 5 minutes ago." In a sarcastic tone, he said in his deep voice, "Well, excuse me, I didn't know there were time limits on blessings." So now it was my turn to be steamed, and I shanked my drive. I turned around and thanked Bob for his kindness. Of course, it was in no time, and we were laughing all about it. I admire Bob's ability to remember minutia, and fortunately, talked to him about 6 weeks ago. His interest and expertise in so many subjects like airplanes, ships, genealogy, World War II history, and much more just always impressed me. He built an HO train set that replicated downtown Elmhurst by handcrafting many buildings. I miss you, old pal. Love, Roy. So I figured as long as I'm up here, I'm going to say a little something too. So, since I've known him since 1967 when we first moved here. Robert Glenn Haley, Bob Haley. I think we will all agree that he was a great man, a lot of character. When I think of Bob, I see him in many ways. I'd like to share a few of the ways that I see Bob. First and foremost, I see Bob Haley as a Christian. He's a great Christian. He lived by the golden rules. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Bob's faith was evident in everything he did. I see Bob Haley as a husband. Not just any husband, a great husband. Bob was a very romantic guy. He loved his wife, Martha, for over 70 years. They've been married for over 70 years. And they were married on Valentine's Day. Now, I'm sure, as with all marriages, there's been some challenges in their life. I mean, who doesn't have those challenges in a marriage? But Bob, you would never know it when you speak to Bob. He always had kind words speaking of his life partner. Mary and Martha also shows that he was a very wise man. He made a great choice for a life's partner. I see Bob Haley as a father. Bob is a father of 4, Karen, Linda, Barb, and David. Whenever Bob would speak about his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, you could see in his eyes the pride and love he had for all of them. All of his children, as well as their families, are just absolutely wonderful, loving people. I remember about 6 weeks ago, I was having a rather serious conversation with my dad right out there at the Epiphany Center. And Bob came up and said, "I'm so sorry to interrupt you two. I just wanted to say how I envy the two of you. And how, at the same time, it warms my heart." So sorry to interrupt you two. I just want to say how I envy the two of you, and how at the same time it warms my heart to see you together like this. I sure miss my father-son discussions I used to have with my son. It was a very tender moment. My heart went out to Bob immediately. I thanked him for sharing that moment, and once again, Bob showed his loving, kind, and generous nature. I'm sure Bob is catching up right now with David. I see Bob Haley as a veteran. Sorry. Father-son, father-children discussions always get me. I see Bob Haley as a veteran. He was a very patriotic veteran, evident what you see here, having served his country in the U.S. Navy during World War II. I remember a couple years ago going to the Abraham National Cemetery with Bob and my dad on Memorial Day. It was an awesome day, and I'm sure it was a highlight for him. And I also enjoyed hearing his stories about the honor flight that he was able to go on. It was just great that he was able to do that. I see Bob Haley as a teacher and a mentor. Bob was a Sunday school teacher here at Epiphany and involved in the Sunday school program here at Epiphany for over 27 years. Back in 1967, when we moved here, Bob was one of my first Sunday school teachers. And as I recall, that was not an easy class to teach. we were all pretty unruly and rowdy. Bob's daughter, Linda, was in my class. I'm sure she can attest that her father had his hands full. Besides myself and Linda, we had Roger Grosser, Larry Magnuson, Scott Algrim, and a few others in our class. If you knew us kids back then, you're probably wondering how we would turn out. Well, I think we all turned out pretty good. Mighty fine adults who are respectful and contribute to society. I know for me, Bob was a very positive role model and a great influence throughout my adult life. I see Bob as a friend. For most of my life, I've seen Bob and my dad as very good friends. They've always teased each other, banter back and forth, usually about the Sox and Cubs. For me personally, later in my years, I also considered Bob a good friend. I never thought I would have a friend 30 years older than me, but I'm glad I did. I found Bob very easy to talk with. We had some great conversation here in the Epiphany Center between services and at Romeo's lunch on Friday every month. I see Bob Haley as a Cubs fan. I have props. Okay, so those of you who know who Bob was, a lifelong die-hard Cubs fan. For those of you who don't know me, very much like my father, we are both lifelong die-hard Sox fans. I was amused yesterday at Bob's wake when Linda introduced me to Ron, her husband, and he said to me, "Oh, you're the other Sox fan." We also know how Bob liked to tease and joke around. So about a year ago, when the Cubs were doing really well, and well, it was over for the Sox, one Sunday Bob started to razz me and give me a hard time about the Cubs' success. I sat there, took it, letting him have his fun. Lord knows, back in 2005, my dad probably gave it back to him many times worse about the Sox. So after he finished talking smack about the Sox, I stood up next to him, looked around to make sure nobody was looking, and I whispered, "Bob, you know I'm a die-hard Sox fan, but I have to tell you something. And if you repeat this to anyone, I will deny it wholeheartedly." You see, Bob, I actually want the Cubs to win the World Series this year for a couple of reasons. First, I think it would be great for the city of Chicago. And secondly, for you, Bob. You have been a dedicated fan your whole life. You are one of the greatest people I know, and it would be a shame if you cannot experience the joy of winning the World Series just once in your lifetime. He looked at me and started to give me that funny grin, as you sometimes do, and I knew he was going to say something kind of a smart-aleck comment, and I went on to say, "Just because I'm secretly rooting for the Cubs to win the World Series, you should know I will never, ever be caught wearing a Cubs hat, a Cubs jersey, or wave the W flag. This just stays between us." Well, Bob, in your honor, I am going to be a true Cubs fan today. I see Bob Haley as a golfer. Well, I'm not really sure how that got there, but Martha was a real golfer in the family. He did golf, just not very well, which is just fine. Knowing Bob, I'm sure he just enjoyed the camaraderie and the fellowship much more than the golf. I see Bob Haley as a comic. How many folks here were on Bob's email joke list? I'm sure it's about everybody here. Bob had a great sense of humor. Not only could he tell great jokes and stories, he was always able to inject a little humor in most serious conversations. Bob Haley, Robert Glenn Haley, a Christian, a husband, a father, a veteran, a teacher, a friend, a Cubs fan, a golfer, a comedian. These are just a few of the many, many things I think about when I think about Bob Haley. Bob Haley, a solid, quality human being, one that we can all learn from, one who loved everyone, and one that everyone loved. Bob Haley one of the finest God has ever created. May you rest in peace, Bob Haley. We love you and miss you.
Thank you. Here now words of scriptures. Two granddaughters will read.
This is a reading from Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your